Welcome everyone to the Kindly Ops Talk Show, a show about technology and helping people work together. We do the show live every Monday and Friday at 12 noon Pacific. Mondays are generally focused on developing technology, and Fridays we focus on people working together. If you're new to the show, welcome. It's nice to be with you. Feel free to submit questions in the question box where you can vote up questions that you really want to have answered live by the panelists. And don't be afraid to submit questions, even if you think maybe your question is for maybe someone that's too novice or too new, because we really appreciate all experience levels, and those types of questions really provide context, especially when we're talking about what we're talking about today, which is upping your Zoom game, improving your work from home media presentation setup. So we know today video is a huge part of the communication process in business, and how you're perceived over video can either help or it can hinder how you're heard by others. But you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money on gear to have high quality audiovisual setup. So we're going to take a look at that today. We discuss this topic, and to begin, I'd like to turn it over to Brandon. He recently went over a really he's recently went over changing and updating his work from home setup and his situation. And so let's turn it over to Brandon, and maybe if you could just share the process and kind of how it's helped.
Sure. So recently I started working from home like a lot of you, and I started out, I live in a small house, just to preface, 2 bedrooms, but no room for an office. So in the living room in the corner, I found myself setting up a little desk area and working from there. And it wasn't bad, but I noticed with my wife working from home as well, she was in and out of the kitchen. My webcam would pick that up if anyone came in or out the front door. So it became a distraction to some, especially during video conferencing. And so I had a storage on my house that was accessible from just outside my front door. I would go out and come into another door, and that contained a water heater, bicycles, shelving, work tools, and I thought to myself that might be a cool little project to renovate that room into an office. And so with some encouragement from you guys, I went ahead and dove right in, and the whole project took me about I'd say 7 days of like solid long days and nights of working just to get it done. And I will go ahead and share my screen and share some photos with you guys.
That'd be awesome.
Let's see here via cable.
I want to see the 7-day studio transformation. You like designed and built a totally custom studio.
Storage to studio. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Are you seeing my iPad or you're seeing the pictures?
We see the picture.
I see the picture.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So this is the storage, what it looked like. You can see it. It's about 6 foot by 8 foot, and went ahead, took out all the stuff that was in there, and there it is. So the water heater was an issue, obviously, and so what I did was I framed a wall around that, and that would be accessible if I need to. Hopefully I never do, but if I do, I'll just break the drywall out, whatever.
And why was that an issue, like the water heater being there?
So you'll see later in the slide that where I positioned my desk in here was going to ride up right against the water heater. And so other than aesthetics, not wanting to see a water heater in the office, it was going to be difficult to do the desk the way that I wanted to position it. So I went ahead and decided to box that in and just hide it. And then I had to put air conditioning in that room and run internet. So this picture is the tight confines of my attic. You can see the Cat 6 wire running over, and then further in towards the abyss is where I had to climb. and hook up the air conditioning. And so that after 4 trips of that, there was some folly. I ran too small of a duct line. It wasn't getting proper airflow. It was hot. So I had to go back up several times and switch that. This is a picture showing my feelings towards what I was working on. And yeah. So there it is. I got the drop in for the AC. You can see all the walls were already plywood because when I initially renovated the home, I plan on using that as a workshop, which I did for several years. And so I just went ahead and never finished it out. Just the ceiling was drywall, but the walls were not. So that made it easy for screwing up drywall and so on. Here is the new internet line. I moved the electrical around. So this wall that you're looking at now is the wall that's directly behind me. And the switch and the receptacles were about, as high as my head would be. So those would be in the field of view to anyone that I'm having like video conference with. So I decided to drop those down and move them to the other wall. So that's what you see there. And now we're getting into the finishes. I got the drywall up, flooring, baseboard, so this is my desk top. I bought a piece of butcher block from a home improvement store near me. I put a notch out in it because my monitor clamps to the desk, so I wanted it to sit flush against the wall. So we notched that out, and there you can see test fitting the monitor onto the desk. And I think the next one we just jumped. Oh no, we still have a couple. So there you can see the wall that was framed out around the water heater, and we put the floating top in there. And then here is the finished product of what I ended up with. Yay. Yeah, so that's what made it all worth it. The sweating and the crawling in the attic, so that I could have a tiny little area to sit and talk with you guys.
Looks amazing, Brandon. Awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Can you maybe kind of just run through kind of your setup there that you have?
Sure. So let me see. I don't know if I can zoom on that. Oh, that might work. Anyway, so I have my MacBook is what I run everything on, and then of course I have a dual monitor. The Keychron K2, I think it is. Mechanical keyboard. I have the Rode mic, and then I went ahead and ordered that boom arm that you recommended, Miles, and it's awesome. It works really good. I have it right here.
Yeah, it looks good.
And then that little shiny button thing in the lower right is just something that showed up in my mailbox one day, and I plugged it in and it looks nice. I don't really know what it does yet, but we're going to learn here really quick. Oh, and then there is my friend goes, "Why do you have a bag of rice on your desk?" And I bought a bag of rice with no intention other than the fact that I thought it looked cool. But I've come to the conclusion that it works really well right in front of my keyboard to rest my wrist on. It's very cozy. So
That's
anyway,
awesome. It's like
So authentic of you.
yeah, so that's
like a
it.
mini coffee bag. I love the bag of rice idea. I've been trying to save my wrists, and that's a great idea, and it looks like a cute little coffee bag. Adorable.
And when, supply levels get low, you can always use it for lunch.
Yeah, I'll barter.
I'm eating my wrist pad.
So I'm not done yet. I still I'm waiting on some different lighting to come in, and then play around with that and get that situated. But I bought a little plant. This guy right here, we can draw faces on him according to my mood. Today I'm happy. Tomorrow could be different. That's that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for
Thanks
sharing.
for letting me share, guys.
And that really is
killer
awesome
job,
because
man. That's awesome.
yeah, and it gives us kind of context. Like when you see your space right now, when we see your view, it's like, oh, we would never know all the work that went into it and what you really had to do, and then also your setup. That's a nice. I would say that's a nice setup because you have everything, you have a space for everything, and it's pretty straightforward. You have, just here's your audio, here's your video, there's your switcher. Maybe we could kind of talk about that little blue, or sorry, that little box with a ton of lights.
Yeah, so I think I'm not going to have very much input on this box with lights, but Kevin and Elliot definitely would have a lot to say about this frustrating device. So maybe they could chime in.
Yes, Kevin, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So Brandon has, I believe, an Atem Mini. I'm not sure if he has the Pro or the Atem Mini, not Pro or not, but one of them, the Pro, includes, that's the one I'm showing here, includes, you see up here in the right-hand corner, some buttons around live streaming. You can kind of barely read it. It says on air and then record. So what that is a very small, portable, 4 input, 1 output switcher. If you have the Pro, it also has a multi-view option. If you have the base model, it doesn't have that option to have the multi-view. A multi-view will show you all your inputs at once, separate from what you're actually sending out. And so what it does, you see these buttons here, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4. That's very self-explanatory. You select those. And you can either, the sky's the limit to it. Elliot's done actually quite a bit more with this actual box than I have, but the general idea of a switcher is that you have multiple inputs and you're switching from one of them to others. So like I have an Atem Mini that I have my iPad with a HDMI dongle coming out of it, so I can show that screen as an input inside the Atem Mini. And then I also have a Sony A6500 feeding in from its HDMI out into the Atem. And so I can seamlessly in Zoom, without sharing my screen, switch back and forth between the two of them. That is a presenting superpower. I didn't have to say, oh, Miles, did you please give me the ability to share my screen? And then have everybody's screen reconfigure and bounce around and me try to find my cursor now and which window am I on and all of those steps. It's literally just, now I'm talking about something I'm showing you. And so that is really the power of the Atem. When you get multiple cameras, it gets even more powerful, but there's tons and tons of stuff you can do with it.
I got to jump in here and embarrass Brandon. I got a before picture. So this is from the show 2 weeks ago. If you guys want to put that up.
Oh, yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
Real quick, Elliot, go back to that. I don't know if I'll be able to show you this or not.
You can spotlight it right now.
Yeah, let me go ahead and spotlight that. So you can see my fishing poles were back there. They had nowhere else to go. I don't know if I can, let me see. I don't know if it's long enough, guys. No, it's not. I'm sorry. But anyway, my fishing poles are in here with me. And they are on the wall on a rack over here. So if you happen to do a studio renovation and you have things that maybe aren't affiliated with your studio, but they have no place else to go, you can always hide them in the room with you like I did. And no one will know.
I think that's a huge point, right? You took a very limited space, and what you've done is you've just reconfigured the space, taking control of what's in your frame. Like, you don't have more space in your house than you had before, but you've taken control of what's showing up on camera.
Yeah, that's huge. Whitney?
I love the fact that you cannot see the door anymore. Like, I really think video is improved when you can't see an entrance behind something. And you really do cut down on the level of risk of somebody walking in and like disturbing whatever video process is happening.
Yeah, and I think controlling what's in the frame is kind of like what Elliot brought out. That's huge because people I don't think that they initially, especially when all of this, jump started, of like being people working from home and setting up meetings from home. I don't think that's one thing I think that people don't quite realize. Kevin?
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but going along with that same line of reasoning, depending on what you were doing before the work from home situation started for you personally, maybe that was in February it started, maybe it wasn't until late April that it started. Maybe you've kind of gone through some iterations of you thought you were going to be working home from a long time and you went back to work and now you're back home and realizing this is longer than you wanted. But it's about deciding to present yourself away. And Brandon alluded to it earlier with his mug, right? He was saying that mug, it represents my feelings today. And a lot of us don't realize that if we don't assert a little bit of structure on the way we're going to appear at work in this new situation, that we might be pretty susceptible to our mood in terms of our effectiveness on those calls. And that's crazy right now because your mood's all over the place depending on which news story you just saw get shoved in your face by your phone or whatever. And so if you have at least a context set up that you're going into, it's kind of deliberate or more deliberate than it was, that gives you the, like we talked about it on the show about avoiding burnout, right? That doorway effect. I haven't successfully implemented it yet, but I would like to have lights that reflect like the intention of my meeting. Like if I'm in a bit more of a critical or urgent thing where I'm trying to stay focused, I would like it to look like that's what I'm doing so that I feel like that's what I'm doing because it influences me, but also the people I'm working with, right? So if I'm pairing on with somebody and I have this very distracting frame and I've got all these things going on and it's so busy, they're probably not going to focus on me and what I say. They're going to be distracted and maybe I will be too. But it really is to me about kind of asserting some structure into your on-camera presence so that you're being deliberate about what you're presenting the same way you would be deliberate about what you wore into an office, but you can't be that way anymore.
Yeah, that's awesome. Elliot?
So I want to do this as a monthly feature, right? Like let's do studio teardowns every month. And the idea is not to like meet some arbitrary level. It's just like to encourage each other to keep making progress. So Brandon, you just finished a 7-day total studio rebuild. I'm jealous. You're definitely ahead of me with your set design. Like the fact there's a little bit of furniture and a plant there, that makes that background look so good and so professional. Do you have something next on the list?
So I have more lights coming. The blue light behind me is actually the one that's supposed to go over to my left for a key light, and it'll change colors to what it needs to be. And then the other lights I have will go back there for the wall. I would like to get your guys' input on, do you think that hanging something on the wall would be distracting to people, or is it better off keeping it simple like this, Kevin?
Yeah, my only input on that is recently on Alex Lindsay's office hours, they've been discussing that exact question. So Alex has been a proponent for a long time of green screen backgrounds because it gives you a lot of control. You can just consistently have this background once you get your lighting figured out, and you don't have to worry about it that much, and then you can move environments, set up a key again, and it looks exactly the same. Recently, though, he discovered a side effect of those choices on the output files for YouTube. So he's streaming his show to YouTube similar to how we are. And he noticed that people who had a solid background with just a splash of color on it, or a more solid background, maybe a gradiated background, but basically generally one color background, gave a lot more detail in their face in the compression that YouTube ended up publishing because there's nothing changing or not as much changing in the detail in the background, frame to frame, as is in your face. But if there's a lot of noise or a lot of lines and all this busyness behind you, it's going to kind of get confused by that and keep trying to compress it all and more evenly. But you can get a lot more detail in your face if you're broadcasting to YouTube, if you have a solid or more neutral, gradiated, subtle background than like a busy, lot of stuff in it background.
And I think too with cameras, I mean, obviously that's a specific use, right? But obviously with cameras, depending on what camera you're using, it can. I know I've had this issue where it's like competing with something behind me, an autofocus. So sometimes you can flip cameras manual. You can manually focus like I have right now. It doesn't really change anything that I do or any action I take. But when you have those background things, especially if it's like a light or if it's something like, that has a lot of colors into it or an object, then it can. If you're using autofocus, it can struggle between focusing on you or focusing on what's behind you. Kevin.
That's a great segue into cameras. We haven't talked about cameras much and the difference they make and all that stuff. I don't know if you're going somewhere, but I'm happy to talk about camera setups too.
Do it.
Yeah, so Miles, I think you're on a Sony, right?
Yeah, Sony A6400.
I'm on an A6500, which is actually older than that model that Miles has. The difference there primarily is in-body stabilization, or IBIS. If you have a lens that has OIS, optical internal stabilization, that stabilizes the lens body itself and it moves that around subtly. But if you have IBIS, that actually shifts the sensor just subtly. But neither of those things really help you when you're stationary. They actually can work against you. So you want to notice that if you have one of those cameras that has that stabilization. If you're on a tripod, you probably want to turn it off because it'll kind of float around on you. But Whitney has a Canon 5D Mark II, and I don't know what anybody else has. But yeah, these are different types of cameras, and you see a difference even though all of them are high quality, right?
Yeah, Elliot, you have a couple cameras there in your studio.
Yeah, so Brandon's on a Brio, Logitech Brio webcam, which is one of their high-end webcams. I think those go for around $299. And then I'm currently on a mirrorless camera. Mine is a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K. And if I'm going to move a little bit, I've got some a fake grass plant in the background there, and you can see that it's blurry. So that depth of field is something that most people probably won't notice consciously, but that many people find like really appealing. And so that's like what portrait mode does in your iPhone, right? Is it like blurs out that background, and you can see that in Whitney's background as well. You can see that Brandon's plants are sharp. He's got a narrower space. I've got a little bit of a deeper space, but I've got a huddle cam, which is also hooked up, which is my current recommendation. Just unboxed this morning. So this is also $299. And this is my current recommendation for a webcam, right? So if somebody's going from the built-in camera off their laptop to an external camera, I think this is the best entry point option. So I'm going to cut back and forth between that. So now this is the Huddle Cam HD. You can see the color is slightly different. It is adjustable with white balance and color and everything, so you can get some good fine tuning there. You can also see that you can see more of my background. So, and actually, I'll just zoom down a little bit. So you can see a big difference here is that fake grass is now sharp and in focus, and you can see the chair, and you can see that I don't have the electrical hooked up on my light switch on the wall in the background. So the field of view is different. But what's super cool about this Huddle Cam HD for $299 is it's a 4K sensor, which is 4 times as big as a regular high def signal, which is 1080. And so 4 of those 1080 screens will fit in one 4K picture. And so this is electronic pan tilt zoom. So I can move this camera around. Oops, I switched back. I can move this camera around, and this is just all happening in software, right? The camera is physically not moving. It's the same thing. So you lose the depth of field, and you have a little bit less control over the framing, but you still have really good control. I can zoom in and out here and kind of get exactly what I need without actually physically reconfiguring my space at all. So that Huddle Cam, it used to be the Brio was my top recommendation, but this Huddle Cam HD is my favorite for an external camera if you're not going to go all the way up to a mirrorless. And I'd say you're probably $1,500 to get upgraded from a Huddle Cam to a mirrorless setup.
Nice. Thanks for that demonstration. And just to clarify, I mean, a Brio, and we can go to you, Brandon. But a Brio that's a 1080 sensor on that, right?
That's also a 4K.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But now, when you're in a meeting, when we're in Zoom, we're doing some extra work on the background and paying for extra licenses to get this in 720, which is standard high def, and then 1080 is even above that. So you're never going to be on a Zoom call this year in 1080p, and you're definitely not going to be in 4K. So we're looking at changing some things in the background to run like a custom show delivery process where we'll actually like bump the whole show up to 1080. But you don't need to get caught in that stats trap of like, oh, it's got to be 4K. What about 12K? You know, all these wild numbers that are thrown around. 1080 is more than you're going to need ever for conferencing. But even at 1080, you can see the big differences in those camera setups.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll have Brandon and then Kevin.
No, I was just going to comment on how cool that was with the camera moving without having to touch it. Right now I have the Brio on top of my monitor, and I actually have it tilted facing somewhat to my right, only because if it was straight on, it would be picking up the door and in my frame. And so for someone like me who has just like quirky OCDs, that drives me nuts that my camera is on top of my monitor tilted to the side. Does it matter? No, but that's pretty dang cool that you can have a straight camera and move your frame around. So,
Kevin?
I was just going to mention, yeah, that ePTZ that Elliot was demoing in the Huddle Cam, if you look for that in a camera, that other manufacturers, other models will offer that from time to time. And I totally agree. It is a very, very useful thing when you're not going to be getting a teleprompter or you're not going to be adjusting your monitors to deal with your eye line. To be able to shift the headspace that you have around yourself when you're in your most comfortable place, but not dependent on the height of your monitor, right? Not dependent on the angle of your camera. That's a huge advantage, like Elliot was saying, with that 4K to 1080 ratio. So APTC is a really helpful thing. But then talking about leveling up to mirrorless, that is like a general floor, is like what Elliot said, about $1,500. But when you compare that with the price it would cost to get 1080p from Zoom, it really puts it into perspective, because officially to get license for 1080p from Zoom, you have to have 10 host accounts. Those are about $12 a month or something like that. So you're paying at least $1,000 a month there. Then you're making a request for 720. And then after they grant that request, you can make another request for 1080, and I don't know whether or not they charge you more at that point. But you're thinking about spending $1,000 per month to get 720p, and your webcam built in, maybe you haven't spent anything on your webcam that you have yet. And so just balance that out, like the pursuit of high definition with the pursuit of high quality, because we haven't tapped into audio. But there are things here that cost way more to improve than it looks like on the surface. Because it's like, oh, I haven't spent any money on it. So obviously if I spend $100, it's going to get better, right? And actually, spending $100 will open your eyes to how bad it is. Not to be all scary and doom there, but if anybody else wants to chime in. Chris has just redone his mic recently, and like there are some gotchas there that weren't related to money. But
Oh, no, I definitely want to talk about that. We'll have Whitney, and then maybe we'll have Chris kind of relate that story about refining your audio. We can go into that next. But yeah, go ahead, Whitney.
Yeah, anytime that I always was under the impression that when you buy like a really nice piece of gear, that should make your job super easy. But what's happened is that it's such good quality gear that it's so sensitive that it introduces all these other learning curves that you have to sit down and actually like figure it out. Because it will eventually, once you've done the heavy lift of like learning how to use the gear properly and set it up properly, which is like the point that I'm at right now, is like the learning process. It will bump up your quality eventually. But yeah, just like Kevin was saying too, like you could also buy all this gear and then be completely restricted by the platform that you're using, which is just something that I don't think people are aware of. I sure wasn't when we started talking about it.
Yeah, definitely, and that it's not gonna be an overnight thing, but you will be able to, as you get more comfortable with it, even just if the only thing that you refine is your video setup, so people can actually see what you're doing dependent on your application, then that learning process will get better and better and better. And then obviously weighing what you're going to use it for is huge. That's a great point. But yeah, that was kind of like, and we can go back to audio or video, it's no problem. But let's talk about audio for just a minute. And we know that's a big thing, especially in communication and business. People you want to be able to hear. You want people to be able to hear you, and vice versa. So Chris, why don't you kind of share with us your home studio build and the audio upgrade that you just did, and how that worked out for you.
Yeah, sure. So I guess we'll start with the whole build or
Sure. Yeah. I
including
mean, you can
all
start.
the
You can start
goodies?
from where you went to. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds great.
Cool. So yeah, I was kind of in a similar situation that Brandon was in, where we have like a small area for my office, and it was the background was basically facing the rest of the apartment. We're in a small studio, so you could just basically see right into our kitchen, and we're in a studio, so there was nowhere for my wife to go except like try to duck and if I was on a Zoom call or something, which was obviously completely terrible and horrible for her. So I wanted to change that up. And that was like one of the benefits of this whole working at home because of the pandemic thing. It's like I was already working at home, but now this puts it a different layer because we're not having people over. So now we can arrange our studio to how it's going to be most comfortable for us as individuals without having to worry about, oh, this is going to look awkward if somebody comes in and walks through the door and it's like the couch is over there or the bed is over there. And it's kind of just funny things that you need to work out with a studio apartment anyways. But once that was like kind of out the door, like, okay, we're not having somebody over for probably a year or so, so let's just have it set up nice. We were able to arrange it to where it's like this is just nice in general, like taking all of that, all those prerequisites out. This is way better, just even if we were to have people over now. So now we were able to arrange my desk in a way that's not pointed in the direction of the rest of the apartment. I was able to install a butcher block table that I had found. And here I'll show it. Let's see if this works. Yeah, so this is a butcher block that I found and kind of
Whoa, look at that
refinished.
overhead view. That's awesome.
Yeah. So like this was helpful just for like comfort level because the previous table was probably stopped about right here. So then I'm really close to the monitor. And then so the focus was a little bit off for that.
What kind of camera is that you're feeding in there? Not to distract you from what you were explaining, but that's
Yeah.
what camera is that?
This is a GoPro Hero 7.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So this all my camera and mic equipment is stuff that I already had, which is I try to tell people like if you just people are like, "Oh, what camera do you have? What camera do you have?" Don't go out and buy this camera just because it, I'm using it. I already
You
had
might
it
buy it because
because
it's the only one in stock. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, I had it because I was using it for my photographic endeavors, and it's also a video camera. It's a Nikon D750 or Nikon D750, wherever you're, depending on where you're from. But I already had it, so I'm not going to go out and buy another camera, right? So, but I did happen to acquire an Atem Mini, right? This is not the Pro, but this is the Mini version.
It's a superpower. Now you've got all these inputs.
Right, yeah. So, and I already had my GoPro, so I used that as well. I just needed to get some cables, and now I can be like, hey, look, I drew you a flower. Have you ever
I
been to
love that
Yosemite?
overhead with the hands in it. It is so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yosemite's
Huge for
great.
presentation too.
Hey, look, do you know what a hoodoo is? We hike the hoodoos. Like that adds just so much more for presentation, but also it's better for I don't know, it's I don't know, it just makes
I've
it a
seen
lot
people
easier
talk
than
about these
just going
document cams, and I think the combination of a document cam, an overhead cam, and your face cam plus a screen is like that is so incredibly powerful as a combination. Like you switching to that overhead view, describing anything on your desk translates to
Yeah.
like I understand as opposed to like I'm trying my hardest to follow you.
right. Yeah. So
Yeah, I'm
was
hitting that same button on my. It's not doing it. I must have it booked wrong. I don't know.
so because I had all this other stuff already, I had my cameras already. I just needed the A10. I had a softbox which I'm using. It's like a 28-inch or 30-inch softbox that I was using for photos. And I put actually just light bulb splitter in there, and I'm using daylight balanced LED bulbs that are running at 5000K, I think. And I have it on a dimmer because they're dimmable. So and I can put, up to 5 bulbs in that splitter. I think I have like 4 in there right now, and it's dimmed a little bit. And it's kind of tucked in a funny spot, but that's my main light. Then I have what brand is that? It's a small LED light. It's like the GS. It's a Pixel G1S, which is just like a nice little battery-powered LED with a tripod adapter on it that can swivel out. And I have that on a tripod behind me. That's kind of like my hair light right here, and kind of fills in this area. Just to add a little bit more oomph to the lighting. And yeah, so now onto the audio. I also have a Zoom F6, which is a field recorder, but it also connects via USB to my Mac, which then acts as a multi-channel input that you can use with Zoom or as a recording device, which is pretty fantastic. And when I was getting it set up, now here's the gotcha. When I was getting it set up, I was also attaching my MXL 750, I think it is. Yeah, MXL 750 microphone that I have right here on my boom. Oh, that's super loud or not. But I just couldn't figure out why it wasn't sounding good. Like, why is this not sounding good? And I had everything cranked. I was boosting the volume as much as possible, and just it was not working at all. It just sounded like garbage. I could just kept hearing like more laptop noise than anything. And then I realized, like, I haven't used this microphone to record anything in so long, I forgot which way to point it. So all I had to do was spin it around so that the pickup pattern logo was on the front of, which was where I was supposed to be picking it up. So once I did that, obviously it's going to start picking up quite a bit better. Hopefully it sounds okay now.
So you plug it in and you're like, oh man, this does not sound like I thought it was going to sound like.
And I'm like staring at it for a little bit. I'm like, oh, wait a second. The logo's, that pickup pattern logo's there. I have to spin it around. Which, because I haven't used it in a long time. So even if you have stuff that's laying around, you kind of need to go read the manual again. But yeah, that's kind of my experience with this whole thing. This is a standing desk, which doesn't move, which is okay for me now because I like to stand more than anything. But I also have like if you have a standing desk, I highly recommend a drafting chair. It's a search
query
wording,
that we can all use.
Is a drafting chair. So it's a little bit higher than it's just a normal office chair, which is, it's hard to find like a comfortable drafting chair. So I found this one. Then I also put, they have casters that are actually rollerblade wheels so that it's quiet for hardwood floors, and it's a lot smoother and it's fantastic. And plus I just like to say I'm on rollerblade wheels. And yeah, that's pretty much my setup right now.
That's super
sweet.
Cool. So I want to call out. You're using a microphone on a boom arm, and you're also using headphones to listen back to the show. So we're not picking up that echo. I think a bunch of us are using mics on boom arms and also using headphones. But I can't see most of them. Kevin's got a mic on a boom arm.
Yep, I'm on a boom
Miles
arm
too.
This is incredibly inexpensive compared to some of the options you might find when Googling around for this sort of thing. But this is a $99 condenser microphone from Audio-Technica. It might even be $98. And then a $15 boom arm, which I have to admit, I adjust about 35 times a day. So you do get what you pay for with a threshold of about $30 there. Once you get up from $30, the stuff starts being a lot more durable.
Yeah, I think me and Brandon on the same. I bought a boom arm just to try it out, really, and yeah, it's like, I think it was like $14, and I mean it's surprisingly way more sturdy than I thought it would be, and it's awesome. I mean, it's one of those things where you get into it and you don't want to there's a lot of different ways to hook up a microphone and to have it fixed in a fixed position, but but anyways, it's nice to have that flexibility, and it's not taking up floor space. It's just clipped onto the side of the desk, and it's super easy. And also limiting that space between your mouth and the microphone cuts down on background noises, 100% almost. So it helps a lot for being able to have people hear you and what you're saying, and for clarity. Brandon.
Yeah, so I love the boom mic. I think it's awesome. I bought the same one that you have, except mine had a wall mount feature rather than a desk clamp. And I'm going to try this real quick and see if it works. There we go. So you can see I mounted it to the wall there, and then I'll pull it down right in front, and it's just awesome, dude. It tucks away. Like, we're over it. We're done.
Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome.
Right back at you.
If you
It's
are
a-
going to remodel a space, it is so helpful to actually think through a little bit before you make everything final of like, oh, where am I going to have this specific thing? Where am I going to have this specific thing? I'm not very familiar with like having purpose-built mini spaces, but I can tell like even that decision right there is like, oh, that makes it a next level feeling space that he doesn't have this accessory dangling off his desk. It's on his wall.
Totally. Whitney?
I'm wondering if you guys could break down for me what the difference is between using a mic like I'm using with a headset mic versus having a mic that's on a boom. Particularly, I'm just wondering for, like, I'm a person that gestures while I talk, and so I can very clearly see that I'm a person that would probably hit that mic all of the time. Is that kind of where you would make your decision, is more of just like functionality of your how you actually talk, or would you base it on something else?
Kevin?
For you specifically, yeah, I did. So just background, Whitney and I live in the same house. We're married. That is a microphone that we switched to today. She's been using a boom microphone that's got a shotgun on it last week, if you compare the audio. And that's going into an H4n as a USB audio interface. But that is particularly useful because the proximity, like Whitney was alluding to, she doesn't have to be right up on the mic. This microphone is less than an inch from my mouth, and I'm trying to sit up straight, but I end up slouching and all these things, and it's a configuration of where my body is, and that combination can get strained as I get involved in the subject that I'm talking about. But when you have a headset mic on, that doesn't happen. The less expensive headset mics, though, that's a Samsung SE10, which is a single ear headset mic with a small 3.5 millimeter connector on it. Those are not as sensitive as the more expensive ones. So what we're running into right now, just in terms of gear we have, is I can't actually turn Whitney's microphone sensitivity up, or the gain up, high enough to get a really strong signal out of her voice without also increasing the general amount of noise that you hear from the room. And so there's things that you can do, you can add to the chain to process that out, but a headset microphone is getting the proximity to the tiniest distance. It's closer almost than I can get without pushing I can push my mouth right up against this, but that headset mic is just hanging out there the whole time. And especially if you're gonna move around, like standing up, I have a tendency to move all over the place. So eventually I know I'm gonna land on a headset microphone because I do like this move, you hit it, like I keep getting myself caught on it, my boom. But yeah, 100%, if you can't afford it, get a DPA 4066 for a headset mic. But that is in the situation where like you doing those presentations effectively is like making a sale for you and significantly impacting your revenue. If you're just chatting on the phone, it may not be worth that big investment.
For sure. Elliot, and then Whitney.
And this ties into a question we have from Lauren, which is for budget users, if an external webcam or boom mic aren't feasible, what would be some easy steps to greatly improve the setup? So I'll talk about audio, and maybe somebody else can talk about controlling your frame. But I just want to lay out like the three major options, right, for audio. So option one is these headphones, which probably came with your phone, right? They've got a microphone built in. Wearing those, and then the microphone is on this little bump in the line there, and actually controlling where that is next to your mouth is the number one thing you can do, right? Versus using the built-in microphone in the laptop or playing the sound through the speakers. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but it is the absolute best sounding. And so that's whether you are holding your phone to do a video call from your phone and you don't even have an arm for it, or if you're on a laptop, just plugging these in and then holding this, so that instead of having it dangling over here, holding this, so you're actually controlling that it's near your mouth, is going to give you the best possible sound. And because you've got the earbuds in, you're not going to get that feedback. So that sounds really good. The next major category is like you get a mic on a boom arm. And what's great about that is it's there at the desk. you literally walk in with your coffee, hit go, and you have sound coming out. So I like that. What's bad about it is you have to control the mic placement. And so if I'm getting uncomfortable, I want to shift around, or I want to use my overhead cam, or I want to do other stuff, I want to change to standing desk setup. I have difficulty with the discipline of keeping this mic in the right place, and I bump it all the time. So I'm also on a headset mic, and I've upgraded that headset mic to be wireless. And I'm also listening on in-ear monitors, right? And so that is probably the ultimate setup that I found so far, because I can move across the room, right? And I'm way over here, but my audio hasn't changed at all, and I can still hear everybody.
I trip on my monitor being plugged in all the time. Like it constantly
yeah, it's a
catches me off
it's a
guard
real
if I need
thing.
to move something. I'm like, oh, that light, I need to adjust it. Oh, and then you got to unplug it.
Yeah, so those are kind of like zero budget, medium budget, and high budget options. But obviously, you're going to be doing video conferences more over the next 5 years, not less over the next 5 years. And so think about what you might have spent on your car over the next 5 years, and that can help you like understand. There's a cognitive load that people have to deal with when you have scratchy audio or faint audio in the background. There's a lot of background noise. They're literally straining and struggling to hear what you're saying. And so just by grabbing hold of that wire and making sure it's held close to your mouth as you talk can make everybody understand what you're saying so much more, and that much more interested in what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure. Those are awesome points. We'll have Whitney and then Brandon.
Elliot answered my question.
Sweet. Brandon?
And I wanted to comment too on Miles is using AirPods. And so those kind of fall in between that first wired set that you were talking about, and then jumping your game all the way up to like a boom mic or even the wireless that you have. The AirPods sound great. I know he's not using them for a mic, but the microphone on them still sounds pretty good. And then you have the newer AirPods have the noise cancellation. So if you're in a call and maybe the environment around you is kind of distracting, it does a really good job at just sucking in and taking all that noise out. Or however they work. I don't know. It makes a suck noise to me.
No, yeah, it is a nice hybrid, because but especially in the quality is still high if you again use an external mic, not just the mic on here. But it's totally possible. Kevin?
I was just going to mention, oh man, now I lost my thought. Elliot had said something about set design before, but related to microphone stuff also. If you realize that you're noisy, or if you want to realize if you're noisy in your microphone setup, or test that out, do a test call with someone else that kind of has a discerning ear, is picky about audio or whatever. And let them hear your best effort, and don't go into that expecting you're going to knock it out of the park, but just have this casual little thing where someone checks your audio, lets you know how it sounds, and then move on from there. But one thing you can do that massively improve your disruptiveness, or just like the cognitive load Elliot was talking about, is if you do have a noisy microphone, just diligently mute yourself. You have full control of that you're not going to be letting that noise, that ambient background noise, in the whole time that you're not talking. You can be diligent about aiming, learn the shortcuts for it, stuff like that. But that alone will reduce it. The other thing that most people have that they don't think about in terms of improving their overall setup under a budget is most people have some way to modify light or to increase the volume of light. Almost everybody has a window. So one way easily, if you're having daytime meetings in your time zone, you can increase the volume of light, is put your desk in front of the window so that the window light is hitting your face. If you face the window behind you, like Miles has here, but he has got overhang, so it's not as intense, it'll be overly bright a lot of the time. But if it's hitting your face, that's going to help your overall exposure be more intense on your face because you're closer to the window, and then your background's going to gently fall off and not be quite as bright unless you have other windows adding light in. But even bringing a lamp onto your desk will increase the volume of light like 1,000-fold if it was even 6 feet away from you before, because there's this inverse square law for sound and for light. And the further away you get from it, the intensity of it falls off much sharper than you would anticipate. So 2 feet is one thing, but 4 feet is double as dim. It's not 1 times more dim, it's twice as dim. And that may not be the right exact numbers. There's charts, you can look it up. But it's more severe than you would expect, and more severe for a camera than for your eye. But yeah, lighting is huge to get whatever camera you have to work well. And then the audio thing after that is about reflection. So I have a lot of sound blankets around. I'll switch to this scene real quick. I have a lot of sound blankets. You can only see one of them in the corner here on the left. That's my MacBook. It's dirty. But I have these on the floor too. So this room I'm in is tile and drywall. That's all that's in it, is tile and drywall and a very flimsy little desk you can see. But I put blankets all on the floor. My light stands have blankets hanging off of them. And all of that is to try to reduce the amount of reverberation or reflection that is bouncing around in this room from just my voice being in it. Because it'll bounce back into the microphone eventually. And that's where you get that competing kind of sound where your ears just kind of like, man, I don't like listening to this. But so just to summarize those three things: add more light, mute yourself diligently, and then reduce sound reflection by putting soft things in front of like parallel and hard objects. So like if you have a hard floor, put soft things on it. If you have hard walls, put soft things in front of them.
Yeah, and like Lauren asked too, is like if you don't have no option for external camera of any kind, be it a clip-on webcam or whatever the case is, placement of your computer, of your built-in camera that's on your laptop that you've been using, maybe placement of that. So controlling that background space. Maybe you get a cheap stand to elevate your computer. We'll be able to change that line of sight for that camera, and then also change what you have going on in the background. Brandon.
Yeah, I was wondering. So, yeah, to me, I don't know how it sounds to you, but to me, when I talk in this little room, it sounds echoey. Very hollow sounding. I don't know if the mic corrects that or not. But I was wondering now, because of what Kevin was talking about, what about like a rug? Because I have a hard floor. So if I put a rug in here, maybe that would absorb some of the sound.
Absolutely. If it reflects light well, it'll reflect sound well. So if it's hard and shiny, like your floor probably is, it absolutely reflects more sound than you want. So even just a area rug is a huge dampener to that. You can even put like carpet padding underneath an area rug. You can cut a smaller piece of it to make it a little bit thicker. And specifically in a case where you're using a shotgun mic pointing down, that really helps the sound not reflect off the ground back up into the mic. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's a really good, yeah, for sure. And there's also, I mean, there's many YouTube tutorials as well on this, that if you're really just starting from scratch, you can go on and see how sound works, what are you trying to do, and then try to fix it with what you have on hand. Whitney?
I have a sheepskin underneath my like picnic table desk essentially right now, and I find that has helped a lot, because similar to Kevin's room, it's all tile, there's barely any furniture in here, so sound is just bouncing all the time. But the sheepskin I just got from Costco, it was like $100, and it's made a huge difference.
That's awesome. All really good advice, especially for starting budget and also starting from what you have just on hand. So maybe I'd like to actually put myself in the hot seat here. I know we want to do this on a monthly basis, but yeah, actually no. Before that, yeah, let's see a use case for incorporating strobe lights into your work from home setup. I think Elliot has a nice example of that. He's going on right there.
I'm always trying to innovate. I'm an innovator. So I found a button on my light that simulates the effect of a cop car. So sometimes the meetings are pretty boring and I need an excuse to get out of them, so I could actually hit a button on my phone. And it looks like there's some police outside, so I got to go see what's happening. So I'll catch you guys.
We got to get an effects pad set up for that.
Catch you guys next week.
See you, Elliot. Thanks so much.
Bye, Elliot.
Yeah, having something like that, I think, especially as time goes on, incorporating these kind of other elements is like a good opportunity to kind of, just change it up a little bit and make sure that, incorporating some of those things that maybe we would have had like in face-to-face interactions on a Zoom call. Brandon?
So I know we're running short on time, but this is a whole nother topic for next time. We need to talk cable management, because that is like a whole nother ball game right there in itself. But I will just say I found that any kind of obviously zip ties or bread twist tie type things, and then 3M makes these things called command strips, and it's like a plastic Velcro type thing that clicks together, and it has sticky adhesive on each side, but it doesn't wreck your wall or whatever you stick it to. So like the big charging blocks that are hanging off and dangling out of the wall once you plug your cord in, if you put a command strip on those, I found, and slap it to the wall with that Velcro, it's like organized and neat. And anyway, yeah, that's a whole nother topic, but I didn't want to forget.
Yeah, for sure. One note about cables, if you're using SDI cables, which none of us probably are, but anybody who is going to do some stuff with SDI cables, do not zip tie them. Somebody who knew a lot more than me about making them the other day was explaining that those are video cables, that the zip tie, because of the indentation it'll make, like the pressure, it actually causes signal interference. And so usually you're using those cables because you have long lines and you're trying to avoid signal interference. They're very expensive, but you want to Velcro those. So just in general, like sometimes it's good to go with the Velcro instead of zip ties. But the bread ties usually work pretty gently.
Oh, that's a yeah, bread ties, and also they're abundant. So you can, every time you go to the bakery, you can make sure to save it. So I want to put myself in the hot seat just for the last few minutes here and get your guys' opinion on my current rig. I'm not going to share a picture of the behind the scenes, but I will share another view. What you don't see is all this other stuff going on here. But and I obviously I've looked over this a little bit. But what would you guys say would be some improvements I can make on this view? Kevin?
I really like your wide angle lens. So that's one thing we didn't really talk about is field of view of lenses. I have a equivalent to a 50 millimeter lens. Whitney has the equivalent to a 50 millimeter lens. Brandon is on the equivalent of a wider lens, is probably around 20, I'm guessing. I don't really know what that field of view is on that camera, but you can look it up, they say. Miles is on probably like an 18 millimeter to 20 millimeter equivalent. And so I like that for you. I tried a wider lens for myself a few days ago, and I didn't like in my setting how it was. So I think depending on where you're standing in the room and stuff, a wide can look really good. In other cases, it might not be what you want. But the only thing that jumps out at me is the eye line. And then second to that, or maybe if the eye line is particularly hard to solve, is the amount of shadow on the side of your face where the light is not on. And so just a tiny small fill light in there would help a lot on that shadowy more side of your face. And then the eye line would, and then the eye line would be just to raise it just a touch so that it's closer to eye level. It doesn't have to be exact, but just generally speaking, closer to eye level. But yeah, I really like it overall. The depth of field you have is super nice. You've got good contrast in the scene. Like I said, there's just a little bit too much contrast on your face, but it's not bad at all, and it definitely looks enhanced versus like somebody that just popped. Like it looks like you're in a setting that you did deliberately. You don't look not professional. It looks very professional.
Thank you. Whitney?
I like your window behind you, but I'm a person that loves symmetry. And so anytime I watch a documentary or interview and someone is right centered in the shot and there's like stuff that is centered behind them, I am so drawn because it just really makes me focus. So I do like your choice of having that window behind you. And like Kevin said with the eye line, I think that that's probably the one thing is I yearn to see your eyes more at my level if I was to do it, because I just feel, like I immediately feel engaged that way. And that's something that I'm trying to figure out too with my setup, because I'm constantly then just like looking at the panel view instead of, hi, how's it going? And that's what I was trying to like figure out with some of my staff this morning too, is like, how does that feel when you look into the camera and you talk versus like just looking at your screen? But you look amazing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, that's a huge thing, engagement of the eyes, and I'm sure there's a whole episode we'll probably do sometime in the future for that. But no, I appreciate that, and that's really a nice example of just doing a rig rundown, seeing what we can improve or what I can improve incrementally over time. Maybe something like a fill light, which I actually have, so I'll definitely try to incorporate that for the next show. But then also camera placement. You know, where can it go that it'll look maybe match. So I can match that a little bit better. So it's nice to be able to continue to refine those things. And again, what's your purpose? What's your goal? It's really to be seen. It's really to be heard, to communicate what you need to on a business level. So that's that'll be actually. It looks like we are at our time here for today. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you everyone for watching. I invite you to join us on Friday. We're going to share our awful interview experiences and discuss why is this still happening.
Like job interviews?
Job interviews, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, why is this an accepted way to be treated during these difficult times? For example, someone might interview 3 times and then not hear at all from the person that they interviewed with, not even a phone call, or maybe just a generic email response on, we didn't select you, and that's about it. So we'll discuss that culture, what's behind it. So I invite you to join us for that. And if you feel like you want to be a part of the conversation, that's awesome. We'd love to have you. Our pre-show starts an hour early at 11 a.m. Pacific. Join us by 11:45. Click the button, raise your blue Zoom hand. We'll put you on a panel. We'll do an audio check and a video check, and you can be a panelist. And with that, just keep in mind all experience levels are welcome. So the only really thing that you need is to be able to be heard, to be seen, to have good internet, and to have good energy. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great day. Hope you have a good week. Appreciate
Great
it.
show. Thanks a lot.
See
Bye,
ya.
Frank.